Risk of Rain 2 is an excellent roguelike game, with over 110 items and 11 survivors. In total, that means a lot of combinations and a lot of different ways to play the game. Risk of Rain 2 is a game that takes tens, if not hundreds of hours to get good at. Because it's a roguelike, it relies on getting good combinations of items to make a successful run. Like a lot of people, when I was first playing the game, if I had a negative experience with an item or a piece of equipment, I would write that equipment off and stick to the more tried and tested items that I knew I liked. However, now that I'm a little bit better at the game, I've been revisiting all of the items and equipment that I just wrote off as trash items, and actually discovering, with more skill and certain playstyles, these items I thought were awful are actually genuinely great. The first example I'm going to be talking about is the Gnarled Woodsprite. It's a equipment, and basically it works as a passive. It constantly heals you for 1.5% of your max health, and on activating it you can send it to either other players if you're playing multiplayer, or turrets or drones. When I first unlocked this item, I picked it up and I was just thought, boring. When I was a new player, I was very focused on having the high damage, and because of that I usually went for things as the disposable missile launcher or the Sormarangs. However, this item it's certainly a lot better than I gave it credit for at the start. Firstly, 1.5% of your max health doesn't sound like a lot, but it does actually make you significantly more tanky, especially in the earlier levels. I'm not going to touch too much on activating it to send it to other players, because I don't think that has a huge necessity. Well, I additionally find it irritating that you can send it to your drones. I still don't really know the strat for sending it to a drone or a turret. I'm still not sure what that would accomplish. But as far as sending it to other players, it's nice. It feels like I'm helping in combat. Sometimes when I'm being a coward and hiding half the map away from the teleporter, it feels good to be able to send a bit of health to the people actually fighting the boss. Additionally, the Gnarled Woodsprite is pretty fun while playing as Rex, because it gives you a little bit extra of safety for when you use your health to damage people. It's just like a bit of a safety blanket. Also, I swear, a good 30% of my deaths in this game are from bleeding out or burning out by those pesky Lemurians. And yeah, a lot of the time I don't have Gnarled Woodsprite. I just sort of sit there like a lemming looking at the burning stat at the bottom left corner, being completely unable to do anything about it. At least having a Gnarled Woodsprite actually usually gives you enough time for the effects to wear off. As long as you can avoid other damage, it's pretty successful in that. Also, I know Blast Shower removes all debuffs, which is also very helpful for eliminating fire and bleeding deaths, but it's not very interesting. And it's not useful either, so it needs to be at least one for me to pick it. Honestly, Gnarled Woodsprite is probably the equipment I go for most often. Definitely on the first loop of the game, but I do quite frequently have it later loops as well, so I am a huge fan. The next item I want to talk about is the Mired Urn, which is the boss item you get from defeating the Clay Dune Strider. Basically, it gives you sort of like a little tentacle that you can attach to either enemies or allies, it doesn't discriminate, and it saps them for health. The Mired Urn also slows down the enemies, which makes it pretty good for death mark. The reason I didn't like this when I first started playing the game was, it feels mean in multiplayer. I don't like to be damaging my other teammates. Equally, it doesn't feel particularly great in single player, because I was always, instead of dealing damage to enemies, I was usually sapping help off of my drones or my turrets. Additionally, it's not got a huge range, whereas pretty much, unless you're playing as probably Loader, it's probably not going to have enough range to hit things. I started coming around on this item when I started to adopt a more aggressive and risky style of gameplay. I find with Risk of Rain 2, when you first start playing it, you're sort of, I was at least, more focused on defending myself and based on survival. But as I got more equipped, I started to be much more focused on damage. So the fact that I was more frequently putting myself closer to enemies within the range that the Mired Urn would affect them. And also, as I was more experienced, I trusted the people I was playing multiplayer online with were also more experienced. And so they wouldn't be too badly damaged by me stealing a bit of their health or now and then. Also, I can't play an online game of Risk of Rain without at least one person burning me with their Hellfire Tiniature just constantly. So, I don't think etiquette matters anymore. The third item I used to hate is the Topaz Broach. This item gives you a temporary barrier on kill. The reason I used to hate it is because I'm the type of person who always looks for permanent upgrades, and having the word temporary in the item's description just immediately turned me off it, and I never really bothered collecting it when I first started playing the game, and it would always be one of the first things I put into scrappers. However, the temporary barrier actually lasts a pretty long time, and especially with characters that can kill many enemies at once. Well, pretty much like all of the survivors, as long as you've got decent level of area effect attacks. That barrier could really rack up to being at least 1.5 times your original health, even double your original health. All in all, it makes for an excellent item, and it's one of the go-to items that I always stack when I'm playing Acrid or another melee character. Next up, the lunar item, Brittle Crown. Basically, you lose gold when enemies hit you, and you gain gold when you hit enemies. When I was a new player and much worse at the game, this was always a bad trade-off for me, because I'd always get hit way more than I'd hit the enemies. And so it'd just result in me losing all of my gold. Especially during the teleporter events. Any gold I'd managed to collect on the level, most of it would be gone by the time I'd completed the boss. However, as I've become more skilled with the game, I can actually dodge fairly easy and shoot people without getting hit back. While I would never take Brittle Crown on a melee character, it is very good for Huntress, Commando, pretty much anyone that does exclusively long range. Last item I'm going to talk about is the Crowdfunder equipment. This equipment takes gold to cost, and like the difficulty, it takes more gold over time. I didn't like this as a new player for obvious reasons. Very similar to the Brittle Crown in that it would leave me without any gold. The way I play Risk of Rain is I rush to the teleporter event, gather all the gold from completing the boss event, and then I go find all my crates. So at the end of the teleporter event, I want to have as much gold left as possible, because that's when I do all my item gathering, and using the Crowdfunder just would not work for that lifestyle. However, in the later stages, when you're probably +2 loops in, money is pretty much worthless. And actually having items isn't particularly that great either. It's still good to stack them, but like, the damage you'd get using a Crowdfunder on a boss versus the amount of gold you'd lose maybe 1 crate's worth of an item, which isn't really worth a lot in the later game. Additionally, I found using Brittle Crown and Crowdfunder together, what a party that is. With both on, you can pretty much go indefinitely. Another thing I really like about the Crowdfunder is it's sort of a toggle on and off equipment. As far as I'm aware, it's the only equipment in the game that functions like that. So you can just sort of switch it on, and then you don't need to aim it. You don't need to really pay attention to it. It can just be an extra source of damage that you don't have to manage, which is very beneficial, especially if you're playing probably Rex, because I always like to keep an eye on my health as Rex to make sure I don't, end up killing myself via one of my attacks. So it's great to just have a constant damage dealer that you don't really need to pay attention to. That was my last item. There's my list. There's still a lot of items and equipment in Risk of Rain that I decided I hated at the start and I still hated. But I think in the case of most of them, I just wasn't skilled enough to use them, or didn't have enough experience with the mechanics of the game to be able to utilise them effectively. But I actually think it's kind of a testament to what a good game Risk of Rain 2 is. That even unassuming items that maybe their benefits aren't quite apparent from the start, you can figure out some sort of combo or playstyle of making them incredibly effective. Which is what I like. As long as you pick a direction and stick with it, you can win with pretty much any items, any equipment in this game. Which is one of the things I really like about it. Who knows? Maybe in the future I'll come around and grow to love Blast Shower. I doubt it though.